All right, you ignorant pigs, put down your crack pipes and your beer bongs. It's time for Holy Divers Night at the movies. This night's offering from Beyond the Pit is Dracula Has Risen from His Grave, 1969, directed by Freddie Francis, written by Anthony Hinds, starring Christopher Lee, Veronica Carlson, Rupert Davies, Ewan Hooper, Barry Andrews as Paul, and Barbara Ewing. Let's check it out. Picking up the story 1 year after Dracula, Prince of Darkness, a priest played by Ewan Hooper encounters a dead body in the bell tower of his church, and this desecrates the church, of course. And then the people of the small Kleinenberg town refuse to go to mass on Sundays because in the evening on Sundays, this is the writing that we're dealing with here. The shadow of Dracula's castle touches the church. Therefore, they think the church is cursed. Enter the Monsignor, Ernst Miller, played by Rupert Davies. And he basically has this talk with the priest who was in the bar drinking after he said mass to an empty church. And they have this back and forth. And one of the good quotes in this movie is, "There is no evil in the house of God. Tomorrow, me and you are going to go up to Dracula's castle, and we're going there for a little exorcism." Now, of course, the ascent upwards to Dracula's castle is always on a mountaintop, which historically, that's how it's always been. Even in real life, he has a fortress, I think it's in Turgoviste, that is on top of a mountain. And so they always have to go up to Dracula's castle, and it's not an easy climb for the two elderly clergymen. The priest, played by Ewan Hooper, that's just his name, is Priest. He doesn't have a name. They didn't give this character, like Priest George or something like that. He doesn't have a name in this movie, which kind of dehumanizes him a little bit. Gasses out halfway up to Dracula's castle, and on his way down, he bumps his head as Ernest Miller continues upwards to the castle to perform the rites of exorcism. He bumps his head and cracks a sheet of ice where Dracula just so happens to be taking a water nap. And the blood from his head wound, basically revives Dracula. And immediately, the priest is so callow, aka frightened and weak-willed, that he's put under Dracula's control. As the exorcism finishes out, Ernst Miller goes down to the town to say that it's done. The evil has been destroyed. Christopher Lee brings the priest up to his doorway, where now there's a giant crucifix in the center of his doorway, and he basically says, "Who has done this thing?" And that's basically the first 20 minutes of every single Hammer Dracula movie. You don't even get to Dracula until about 25 minutes in. They always have to invent a new way in the sequels to bring Dracula back from the dead. In the first one, he was defeated by Van Helsing with the use of sunlight and reduced into a pile of ashes. In the second one, he was killed by running water. In the second one, there was also some big satanic ritual that his servant performed, sacrificing a human victim to put blood on the ashes to bring Dracula to life. So this one, in this regard, is a little bit weaker than the second version on how they brought Dracula back. He was just defeated by running water, which is good because he wasn't destroyed. And I think that if you were going to continuously resurrect Dracula, you have to find a way to defeat him without killing him, which makes it easier to write, at least. So then you go to the middle of these films, almost the near middle of these films. The next 15 to 20 minutes is used to introduce our protagonist power couple. It's often a young man who's an allegory for an inexperienced knight and a damsel in distress that always lives in the wrath of Dracula, because by the second act he always goes after the woman with third billing in the movie. Then they also introduce the rest of the ensemble cast and your victims. Hammer always had a tendency to throw Michael Ripper into these movies, and why not? The guy is a tremendous character actor. He has way too many Hammer credits to count. He was in The Wolfman. He played a drunk. He was in The Wolfman. Not to mention, he was also in The Mummy and Phantom of the Opera. The list goes on. He played the town drunk in The Mummy, to be exact. Excuse me. But the big box office draw of these movies is Christopher Lee, followed up by the second, which is Rupert Davies. And he's the star of the TV show McGray, which is a detective drama at the time frame. And it must have been very popular because it went 4 seasons, and with how cheap the British are, you don't get to the 4th season unless your show wasn't popular. You usually get the one season or the 2 seasons, and that's it. But he got to the 4th season. So then you have the next 80 to 90 minutes to unfold the rest of the story. The thing that kills me about this movie is that you don't really get to any vampirism until the second act, the end of the second act, when Barbara Ewing's character, Xena, is chased down by Dracula while he's on a stagecoach, whipping the horses, weaving through the forest. You see just how maneuverable a dark coach or chariot is as he chases her down, rips her choker off, moves her face to the side, and feeds on her for sustenance and turns her into a servant. The third act brings the priest and Xena bring Dracula into the sewers below the bakery where Paul works, and he's just down there, and this is where Maria, played by Veronica Carlson, would encounter Dracula for the first time. Xena puts a bag over her head, and basically Dracula's about to feed on her, but Paul interrupts. And then later on, Dracula comes to Maria in the night in one of the best gothic horror movie sequences ever shot. And I got to give the director Freddie Francis credit for this sequence because it's just amazing. It's probably the most gothic thing I've ever seen. And you see him come through the window, very dark, very tall, and it's just all of those things. And the way that it's shot up, he shows his Freddie Francis shows his background as a director of photography rather than as a normal director, because usually these movies were directed by Terence Fisher. So you've got this good gothic horror set, because when Dracula comes through the next time, he's chased away by the Monsignor. Monsignor gives chase holding a crucifix, and Dracula, of course, flees from the sight of the crucifix, and he's also being chased by somebody who believes in God. And, you need the belief in God in these movies to defeat evil. And, of course, his servant helps him out and gets him out, and they hit the Monsignor in the head with a flower pot. He staggers back to where he lives, and he calls for his sister-in-law to bring Paul to the house. He explains to Paul that there are ways to fight the vampire, and then he kind of cashes in his chips. Now, little does Paul know that if who goes and gets the priest to help him, they try to use devices, and the priest is trying to break free of Dracula's power the entire time. They put cloves of garlic out. They do all the precautionary measures to keep the vampire from entering Maria's room, in much the same way Van Helsing and Dracula put precautionary measures out: wolfbane, garlic, crucifixes, and holy oil to keep the vampire from crossing the threshold. And that's basically the end of the third act. And then you go into the last act, which is usually the last 15 minutes of the film, is how are they going to defeat Dracula this time? Garlic, sunlight, crucifixes, stake through the heart. What are they going to do? And what happens when an atheist tries to use any of these methods? So basically, according to the rules, you have to be a believer. as Paul finds out the hard way, because both Maria and Paul were betrayed by the priest to Dracula. Dracula, of course, gets Veronica Carlson's character, Maria, and he marches her up to the castle, and he has her pull off the crucifix, blocking the door. Paul catches up. There's a struggle, and the thing that really kills me about this movie is that is the way that they kill Dracula in this one. During the struggle with Paul, he just awkwardly falls onto a crucifix that was thrown aside onto the ground. And he's impaled on the crucifix, and he still won't die until the priest finally prays the Lord's Prayer. Pater Noster, qui es in caelis. And this is what defeats Dracula, and he dies impaled on this crucifix. But, you know, I mean, without spoiling much more of the movie for you, let's get to those Slayer Pit totals, because I know you've been waiting for it. We have 4 dead bodies, 2 Hammer horror babes, Veronica Carlson and Barbara Ewing, another guy named Paul, gratuitous Michael Ripper, 2 cases of vampirisms on damsels in distress, 1 case of slapping a bitch Sean Connery style, 1 exorcism, 4 dead bodies, 1 flower pot to the head, 1 candlestick to the head, 1 crucifix impalement through the chest, crucifix foo, several awkward tumbles out in front of Dracula's house. Slayer Pit awards go to Christopher Lee for Best Actor, The Man Who Is Dracula, Rupert Davies, There Is No Evil in the House of God, and Freddie Francis, Best Director, for Doing Things the Terence Fisher Way. Holy Diver gives it 3 skulls. Check it out for the month of Halloween, because you won't be disappointed. The thing that I like about this movie, that it is rated G for general audiences, and you can watch this movie with the whole family, and it's just a good popcorn movie for the month of Halloween, and it didn't have to resort to any of the smut that other horror films would resort to in order to get a box office draw. Anyway, that's it for this one. As you know, if you want to get in touch with me, you can hit me up on Instagram. Not to mention, you can, if you really want to help out the channel, don't forget to subscribe to my Rumble page, Soy Free Warhammer. And as you know, YouTube has many features you can use to interact with me. You can like the video, dislike the video, comment, or subscribe. But until I see you again, thanks for watching this movie review, and we'll see you in the next one. Happy Halloween.
More of an expert at exposing the moon. Get out of here! Let's go! See if you find the one crater.